I used to think fairness was a ledger you could balance if you worked hard enough. Columns, totals, neat little footnotes that made sense of what people did and what they deserved. That's the kind of lie you tell yourself when you grow up in a house where rules bend for one person and snap for another. It's also the kind of lie an accountant like me is dangerously good at believing. I'm Daniel Brooks, 32 CPA. I live in Nashville in a condo a short jog from the Bicentennial Mall where the farmer's market smells like peaches in August and kettle corn the rest of the year. If you stand on my balcony, you can hear the ghost of Broadway on a Friday night, boot heels, bad decisions, a harmonica that never finds the right key. I like the sound. It reminds me that chaos stays in its lane as long as you don't invite it home. I grew up in Donaldson in a ranch-style house with a carport and a magnolia that tried to lift the roof with its branches every other spring. My mom, Denise, was the kind of woman who called herself a mama bear, but only had claws for other people's kids. For her own, she ran a permanent warm bath. My dad, Frank, fixed air conditioners until his back started hissing at him like a leaky line. He missed dinners, made up for it with Saturday morning pancakes and the kind of silence that feels like permission. Then there was Brandon, my younger brother by 2 years and mom's favorite by a mile. If you've got a Brandon in your life, you don't need me to describe him. If you don't, imagine a smile that arrives before the apology and a talent for turning trouble into a group project. From the time we were kids, he was the kind of charming that gets you extra cookies and out of consequences. I was the kind of kid who alphabetized his baseball cards. People think my resentment is about envy. It isn't. When the same referee cheats for one team every game, you stop caring about the score. You just want a new sport. In 8th grade, Brandon decided my glasses were a personality flaw. He would pretend to bump into me in the hallway and knock them off by accident, then look horrified and say, "Bro, why is your face so close to the floor?" Once, at breakfast, he palmed a pepper packet and cracked it over my scrambled eggs. When I coughed, he laughed. Mom barely looked up from her Bible app. "Boys," she said, as if the word explained everything and cured nothing. The low point came junior year, home alone on a Saturday when Dad was on a service call and Mom was at some church thing. Brandon found a disposable lighter in the junk drawer and thought it would be hilarious to wave it close to the back of my head while I studied. Heat licked my hair and the smell of singe hit my throat so fast I gagged. He laughed until he saw my face. "It was a joke," he said, the way people say it after they discover the line in the sand had a cliff on the other side. Dad came home, saw the half-melted hair on my collar and the lighter on the counter, and something in his face shut down like a room losing power. "You touch him with fire again, and I'll be the one who calls the cops," he told Brandon, and for once it wasn't a joke. That was the first time I felt the tilt of our house change even a little. Mom tried to paper it over. Frank, he didn't mean it, but Dad didn't look at her. He looked at me. "You don't have to take that," he said. It was 11 words more than I'd gotten from him on some birthdays, and they drilled into me like anchors. Brandon behaved for a while after that, but he never apologized. He traded heat for other measures, small humiliations, sudden silences, whatever currency buys a person like him the feeling he's bigger. If I asked him a question across a room, he answered Mom. If I offered him a ride, he texted a friend instead. He once told me, at a kitchen island freshly wiped by a hand that wasn't his, that I would make an excellent assistant for someone smarter. No offense, he said, like offense was a faucet he could shut off. I learned to answer to air. I left for UT Knoxville with a scholarship and the relief of a man stepping into shade. College felt like a room with windows that opened. I learned that if you show up on time and say what you mean, the world gives you a chair and sometimes even a second cup of coffee. I met Emily the year I came home to Nashville after passing the CPA exam on the first try. She was 25, a dental assistant at a practice in Green Hills, and she had the kind of smile that made you feel like you just stopped bleeding. We met at a coworker's backyard barbecue in Sylvan Park. I was hovering near the grill because I don't know what to do with my hands at parties. She sidled up with a plate of watermelon and a joke about how nobody can eat that on camera and look dignified. "You're Daniel, right?" she said, like she already knew the answer would be yes. We talked about everything except what we were both afraid of. Herself outgrowing her job, me outgrowing the version of myself who still checked the door twice. She liked that I had a plan. I liked that she made a plan feel like a dance instead of a spreadsheet. We married the following fall. A small ceremony at a chapel that smelled like wood polish and warmed over faith. Reception at a restaurant on 12 South where the bourbon menu was longer than the dinner one. Mom cried more than necessary. The kind of tears you might mistake for pride if you didn't know she could turn them on like a faucet when a camera emerged. She took credit for my suit, for the weather, for the way Emily's hair caught the light. Brandon gave a toast that sounded generous if you weren't listening to the words. "To my brother," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with a hand that asked for attention as he gave it. "He's always been the responsible one. Like, painfully responsible." Laughter. "But he found someone who makes that look sexy." Confetti laughter. He grinned. The room grinned with him, and I grinned because a wedding makes you complicit in your own illusions. The start of our marriage was the easy portion of a treadmill, the speed you think you can keep forever. Mornings with coffee on our small balcony, Emily's scrubs draped over the chair, my tie half knotted while I mulled client calls. She made up names for my clients. Mr. Cashflow, Ms. Depreciation, and I pretended not to laugh. We wanted a kid. We didn't want a kid yet. We had a plan for later, like everyone with a calendar and decent health insurance. Brandon floated around the edges of our life like the smell of someone else's cologne in a hallway. He sold cars on Rivergate and wore shirts so tight they looked painted on. He bragged about commissions and tips waitresses left him for the table. Mom posted photos of him on Facebook with captions like, "My handsome boy doing big things," and a prayer hands emoji that made me grind my teeth. Dad stopped commenting on her posts, which, in our family, was an act of rebellion equivalent to torching the carport. Emily was nice to Brandon in the way nice people are to unreliable ones when they still believe in them. She laughed at his jokes at family dinners and met his eyes when he performed, which fed him like a slot machine. He flirted with her the way he flirted with every woman, little compliments he could later call harmless if anyone bled. Once he told her, "You look too good to be handing out fluoride," and Mom swatted his arm and said, "Brandon," as if the syllables would teach him manners if you hit them hard enough. The first signal that I should have paid attention to was a ridiculous one, a gas charge. Emily and I split expenses the way couples do who haven't reached that phase of marriage where everything is communal and nothing gets thanked. I handled rent and utilities, she covered groceries and the car. One night I was reconciling our monthly budget because that's what passes for foreplay in my line of work, and I saw a charge from a gas station off Gallatin Pike at 12,043 a.m. Emily had been staying late to help the hygienist prep for a morning root canal. I asked her about it the next day. "Oh," she said, and the vowel stretched into a rope. "I was starving. I grabbed a protein bar." At 1:45, I said, fishing for humor, hauling up something else. "They were out of everything at Kroger. Don't audit my snacks, Daniel." It was a funny line the first time. It got less funny when the hotel ledger showed up in our mailbox. We'd signed up for a card that gives you extra points if you use it for certain travel expenses even when you're not traveling. It was my idea, I won't lie. I have a spreadsheet for points. The brochure says, "Free nights," and my brain hears math you can eat. The envelope showed activity by partner program, and there it was, the Caraway Inn, 2 separate charges, weekday nights, a kind of hotel that gets very defensive when you call it a motel. Emily said the practice had booked rooms for out-of-town training. A lot of dental continuing ed happens online now, but this is Nashville. There's always some conference, some workshop with a logo as earnest as its empty chairs. I didn't accuse, I stored, I told myself it's a ledger and some lines are just weird, and weird isn't a crime. We got pregnant in late spring, the test buying us joy on credit. Emily cried on the edge of the tub and said she'd never been so happy and so scared at the same time. I put a hand on her knee and said, "Me too," because even accountants know you can't throw numbers at fear. We told my parents over meatloaf at their house. Mom shrieked in a key only dogs love and clasped Emily's hands. Dad squeezed my shoulder and smiled with the side of his mouth that wasn't ruined by the years. Brandon slapped my back like he was starting a stalled engine. "Uncle B," he said, and then to Emily, "You're glowing. Daniel, treat her like she's made of, what's that expensive fabric? The shiny one." "Silk," Emily said. "Right," he said, as if he'd donated the word. Here is where the bad screenplay would make me find a text message on a lock screen, some cartoonish sex that leaves nothing to interpretation. The real thing was dumber. My parents asked me to fix their Wi-Fi. They live in the same house. Dad claims he's going to downsize. Mom says the house is her ministry and the extra bedroom is for missionaries and grandbabies. They called me because the church ladies group was having trouble with Zoom, and every time Mom tried to stream a sermon, the picture froze on a pastor's mouth mid-O. I brought my laptop, my patience, and a bag of cables you accumulate when you're the tech person in a family that thinks cloud is weather. On their kitchen counter sat an iPad in a folio case the color of eggplant, the screen lit to a lock screen with Emily's face. I froze like a man who has found a snake on his boot. Mom looked up from a pot roast like a magician who's proud she pulled off the trick. "Oh, that," she said. "Emily logged me into something on it last Christmas so I could see the pictures you two took at the Opryland lights. It's just easier if we leave it. She's better at that stuff." "M's iCloud?" I said, and heard the flatness in my voice. Something, Mom sang, like the prefix made her modern. Let me say this, so I'm not the villain in my own story. I didn't guess the passcode. It didn't need one. Mom had set it to never lock, so her prayer app wouldn't demand digits from her at inconvenient times. When I picked it up to adjust the Wi-Fi, a banner slid down the top of the screen with a preview of a message. It said, "You around?" and the contact name wasn't a name. It was a letter. B, gray circle, no last name. My lungs did something ugly and useful. They stopped, then remembered. I told myself it could be any B. Bergman from the practice, Bethany, Billy. But my thumb opened messages anyway because I am human and because the version of me who trusts without checking died under a magnolia tree years ago. The thread was months long. Hidden alerts, which Mom hadn't turned on because she didn't know how. Photos of glasses of bourbon I'd never poured in rooms I didn't recognize. Some with framed Titans jerseys on the wall. Some with the kind of fake wood headboard budget hotels buy in bulk. The conversation wasn't all sex. That's the thing that killed me. It was errands. It was you got home safe and bring the fluoride jokes. It was nickname level casual. It was a map of a relationship built like a bad deck. Every board placed wrong but in a way that looked fine until weight hit it. I scrolled, trying not to breathe, like a man watching his own house flood. A photo stopped me. Emily at my parents' front door, roughly midnight if the timestamp could be trusted, her hair in a messy bun I used to think was just for me. I looked at the picture twice and felt stupid for not recognizing the background. Then I realized that what had made it unfamiliar wasn't the door, it was the car visible in the corner of the frame. Brandon's orange Mustang, black stripe like a bruise. The kitchen camera angle was too specific. I put the iPad down like it could explode, and I stood on the porch and told myself I needed air. Really, I needed a view of the doorbell. Dad had installed a Ring last year after his friend got his tools lifted from his truck bed. The lens-blank eyes stared at me, a miracle and a curse for people who can't stand questions without answers. Dad, I said, coming back inside, pretending to juggle tech, you ever check the motion clips? It might be clogging your Wi-Fi. What now, he said. The doorbell camera. It saves little videos every time a squirrel sneezes. He grunted. We are a grunt-positive family. I pulled the app up on my phone and asked Dad to tap his password into it because some lines you don't cross even when you feel edged to. The timeline rolled backward. I found the night that matched the photo and hit play. Emily's car pulled up to the curb at 11:49 p.m. She got out, hood up, shoulders forward. Brandon opened the door 10 seconds later and put a finger to his lips, a gesture that made me see red so cleanly I almost respected it as a color. Who's that? Mom said behind me, and there was a tone in her voice like someone noticing the weather. It's Emily, I said, visiting. Brandon's such a sweetheart, Mom said. He let her in when my back was out. She brought soup. She and I are close, Daniel. Not everything's about you. I wanted to laugh and couldn't find the air. Not everything, I said, and turned the phone over, face down on the counter, as if the tile was a shield. It would have been easy to go feral in that moment. To walk down the hall and claw the walls until Dad pulled me off like a dog at a fence. Instead, some trained part of me, some part that has had to show up to audits with coffee and documentation, sat me in a chair and made a plan. My brain put lines between charges and timestamps. The Caraway Inn charges lined up with text like I'm here and you coming to 214. The gas station map drew a triangle between our apartment, my parents' house, and the motel. I was an accountant again, and the numbers told a story I didn't want to believe. I didn't confront Emily that night. If you've never kept the conversation in your mouth like a hot coin you're trying not to drop, I don't recommend it. I went home, sat on the edge of our bed, and watched her sleep. Pregnancy looks like peace when you aren't the one carrying it. Her face was so young, and the thought that kept hitting me was not, you betrayed me. It was, we were going to be parents. Like being a parent is a team sport and we were running in opposite directions. The next morning I told her I needed an early start, and I walked to work because the air had to move or I'd break. At the office in Germantown, I closed my door, a thing I only do when a client's crying or I am, and I called my friend Ty from college, who is the only person I've ever known to mix bourbon with kale successfully. He listened, didn't say I told you so, and asked what I wanted. I want to be wrong, I said. Second choice, he said, because he asked the questions that keep you alive when the first choice isn't on the menu. I want the truth, I said. I want to know it so fully I don't have to touch it twice. Then get it, he said. And when you have it, don't set yourself on fire to keep anybody warm. I kept getting it. Over the next 2 weeks, I built a ledger no one could argue with. I exported our bank statements into a CSV and filtered for hotel names and gas stations. Patterns do what patterns do, they stood up and waved. I took screenshots of the iMessages that tied dates to places and places to looks on Emily's face I had mistaken for a new brand of happiness. I exported the Ring clips Dad gave me permission to download under the umbrella of, this thing is killing our data plan. I created a folder called Housekeeping because names matter when you're telling a story to people who don't want to hear it. There's a part of me that wanted to walk into our living room with a manila folder and a speech like a movie lawyer. But this isn't a courtroom that rewards theatrics. It's a family. Family hears what it wants to until the sound has nowhere else to go. I picked a date that made narrative sense and human sense, Sunday dinner at my parents' house to celebrate the baby. Mom had already planned it, just a few church friends, which means any woman who has ever held a casserole dish in our kitchen, plus Gerald, who prays like he's auditioning. I told her I'd bring a pie, which made her almost like me. The day arrived in that luminous way Tennessee Sundays have when the heat forgives you for a minute. Emily wore a blue dress that gathered under her ribcage like a promise. She put her hand on her stomach in the mirror while she turned, and I felt a bolt of love so strong it embarrassed me. It would be cleaner to tell you I was done with her by then. I wasn't. I was a man with a 1,000-yard stare and the nerve to set a table. We drove east past the fairgrounds and the stadium, the city doing its thing in the rear view. In the car, Emily hummed to the radio without listening. People hum when the air is between them and they don't understand why. I told her she looked beautiful. She looked out the window and said, "You're sweet," and I counted to 10 because counting is my drug. At the house, the smell of roast chicken and Lysol kissed us at the door. Mom squealed and touched Emily's stomach like a divining rod. Dad hugged me, eyes small under the weight of hoping it would all be normal. Brandon showed up 20 minutes late with a bouquet and paper that said a gas station had tried, and he kissed Emily on the cheek in a way that made me see electric white light. I said hello to him like we were strangers at a bar. His smile faltered for a second, just a nick, and then he clapped his hands and announced he was starving. Dinner buzzed. The church ladies cooed. Dad poured iced tea like a bartender in a dry county. Mom asked if we'd considered naming the baby after her father and then listed a dozen names that were not his. Brandon performed small chores like a Boy Scout auditioning for sainthood. He refilled water glasses, he lifted the heavy dish like it weighed nothing, he told a story about a customer who tried to return a car because the GPS voice sounded like his ex. Everyone laughed like he paid them. I waited until the peach cobbler. It felt right. The sweetness, the heat, the scoop of vanilla refusing to hold its shape. People had loosened the way people do when sugar does its trick. Mom put down her fork and announced she had a surprise for the baby, and for a moment I thought she'd drag out a blanket with crochet Bible verses and I'd have to break the world against yarn. Instead, she brought out a box of baby clothes from when I was little, as if the past could be a gift if you laundered it enough. Before we do hand-me-downs, I said, standing because my legs needed a reason to exist, I have something too. Emily's head turned in that slow way it does in old movies when the camera is the real subject. Brandon looked bored on purpose. Dad folded his napkin and asked, without words, whether we were about to fight. Mom straightened like a cat that's heard a noise in the next room. I'm going to tell a story, I said, holding the iPad in a case that once tried to be eggplant. It has dates and places and pictures. If anyone has a better story after, I'm ready to hear it. Daniel, Mom said, warning folded in the way she said my name. Let him talk, Dad said, not loud but final. I tapped the screen awake and the thread surfaced like a corpse. The first photo was harmless if you didn't know what you were looking at. A glass on a table, a corner of a jersey on a wall, a caption that said, your turn to buy. I swiped. A timestamp. Another swipe. A video clip from The Ring, Brandon opening the door at 11:49 p.m., Emily stepping in, the hush gesture. You could feel the oxygen leave the room like a thing with legs. What is this, Mom said, but it wasn't a question. Messages, I said, from Emily's account, on your iPad. You asked her to set it up so you could see pictures. It synced more than that. Emily made a sound I'd never heard from her. Not a cry, not a plea. Something like a person realizing the floor they're standing on is an illusion. Daniel, she said, please. Please what, I said, and for once I didn't smooth the edges of my words. Don't do this here, she said. Where then, I said. In a room where you get to control the lights. Brandon stood up too fast and knocked his knee on the table. His grin appeared, his armor. Dude, he said, whatever you think you saw. I know what I saw, I said, and I know the smell of the motel carpet at the Caraway Inn too, because our Bill told me. And I know gas stations don't sell protein bars at midnight that take you to the exact corner where your Mustang sleeps. You're sick, Mom said. Spying. That's sick. I fixed your Wi-Fi, I said. The spying happened when you asked my wife to log the family into her cloud. You can't talk to your mother like that, Mom said, because when the conversation gets too bright, she draws the curtains. Denise, Dad said, and his voice had a tired in it I recognized as a new creature. Hush. Emily reached for my arm and stopped her hand in midair like we'd rehearsed the scene and remembered our lines were lies. I was lonely, she said, and the truth of it rang. You were working late. You were always working late. She looked at me like the apology would find me on its own. It was a mistake. It was a season, I said, staring at the dates, at the way the thread moved through holidays and Tuesday nights like a vine through a fence. Brandon tried another tactic. He chuckled, low, soothing, the sound he uses when he's selling you a feature you don't need. Look, man, he said, not meeting my eyes. Things happen. We're family. You're going to be a dad. Let's not nuke Thanksgiving. Are you the father? I said, the sentence entering the room like a metal taste. Emily's mouth opened and closed. I had never seen her at a loss for words. She's the kind of woman who can talk someone through a root canal. Now she was the patient. I don't, she began. I don't know. That sentence is a crime scene, and an ambulance, and an empty parking lot. Mom made a sound like a tea kettle. Dad pushed back from the table and stood. He doesn't do speeches, he does gravity. He came around to my side of the table and took the iPad from my hand and looked at the screen for a long beat, as if he could drag a better ending out of it by staring. Brandon, he said, name like a diagnosis. Dad, Brandon said, trying a smile that must have worked on every woman he's charmed and every salesman he's out-charmed. Get out, Dad said. Excuse me? Mom said, a script flipping in her hands. Get out of my house, Dad told Brandon, and the word house bent, just a little, toward me. Brandon laughed. It sounded wrong in the room. A canned track played over a documentary. You're kicking me out? For what? For some text? For being the only one who actually comes when Mom calls? Now, Dad said. It wasn't volume, it was torque. He put a hand around Brandon's upper arm. Not violent, not even hard, but like a man reminding another of the laws of physics. Brandon pulled back, then saw our father's face, the set of his jaw, and something in him remembered that this is the person who taught him to tie his shoes and hit his brakes. He grabbed his keys. The bouquet paper crinkled under his elbow and scattered grocery store petals on the floor. He looked at Emily once, just a flick, and I saw what I hadn't let myself look at, the secret language built when you build something wrong. She lowered her eyes, and I felt a meanness in me that scared me with its temperature. When the door shut, the room made a new sound. The sound a house makes when it decides who lives there. Mom's hand went to her chest like she'd been shot by a memory. Frank, she said, you can't. He's our son. He's your son, Dad said, and I'm ashamed I let him be mine this long. Then he turned to Emily. He didn't soften, but he didn't sharpen either. You need to go home, he told her. Not with Daniel. Not tonight. Emily nodded like a penitent and stared at the table. I'm sorry, she said, to no one in particular and to me, and I heard the thinnest edge of anger in my own breath because sorry is a word with 1,000 meanings and none of them rebuild a door. I'll drive you, Mom said, standing fast like a life raft with a hole in it. No, I said, and it came out calm. A miracle. I'll call her a ride. I can drive myself, Emily said, and stood, and I realized she was shaking. She put a hand on her stomach, and every protective part of me leaped even then, even there. Emily, I said, and had to swallow to get the rest out. We'll get a test. It will tell the truth. We'll make decisions based on that, not on what we want to be true. The sentence tasted like cardboard. Necessary, unlovely. She nodded. Okay, she said, almost a whisper. I walked her to the driveway. The evening had that serve to it Nashville gets when the day doesn't want to let go. Crickets auditioned for a choir out in the Magnolia. She put her hand on the car door and didn't open it. Do you hate me? She asked. The words so small they almost didn't survive the air. I wanted to. It would have been easier. I shook my head. No, I said. But I don't know how to love you in this shape. She flinched like I'd hit her and got in the car. The door shut. I watched the taillights blink at the end of the street and disappear into a night that suddenly felt unsafe for everyone. When I came back inside, Mom was crying, the kind of heaving, theatrical cry that gets you thanked by women in the church lobby. Dad was in his chair, hands folded on his stomach, staring at a point on the wall where there wasn't a painting. I sat across from him and he looked at me a long time. So long it should have felt like a test, but it didn't. It felt like inventory. I'm sorry, son, he said. The sentence tilted the earth. You didn't, I started. I let your mother turn this house into a story where one boy could do no wrong, he said. That's on me. Mom sniffed. Don't you start. He needs grace. She needs grace. We all need? What we need, Dad said, mild as he stood, is quiet. He put a hand on my shoulder, heavy and father and late. We'll make it right. Nothing will make it right, I said, and the voice in my own mouth was the voice of someone admitting a death aloud. He didn't argue. He left the room, came back with a legal pad from the drawer where bills and warranties go to die, and clicked a pen like a man who has decided to write a new ending. Not tonight, I said, because even revenge has to sleep. He nodded. Not tonight, he agreed, and sat again like a man who had just noticed the weight of his body. I went home to a bed that smelled like us and no longer felt like a place. Emily texted once, I'm at my sister's. I typed back, thank you for letting me know, then stared at the 3 dots that didn't appear. The quiet felt like medicine and like a poison. I lay on my back and watched the ceiling fan carve circles into my future. In the morning, I made coffee because coffee is a way to convince your hands they still belong to you. I called a lawyer because I know my limits. They start where feelings meet courtrooms. Her name was Margaret. She had a voice like someone who has said no to 6 people already today, and she listened without the sighs people give when they think you're rehearsing a drama. We'll do a paternity test, she said. We'll keep it clean. Don't move money, don't move out, don't move the baby's furniture, don't send any emails you wouldn't want a judge to read in a voice you hate. What do I do in the meantime, I asked, because there are 57 minutes in every hour when you're waiting for a test and each one needs a task. Be boring, she said. Be very, very boring. I tried. I went to work and solved the cash flow problem for a restaurant near 5 Points that sells hamburgers so good they make vegans cry. I said happy to help and nodded into the phone like their relief was mine to borrow. I walked to the river at lunch and watched a tourist boat crawl by with a captain narrating the skyline to people who would forget the facts by dinner. I stayed away from the places where the city sings about heartbreak like it invented it. That evening, Emily came home to get some clothes. She knocked, because we were those people now. I opened the door and tried not to look like I was hoping the act of turning a knob could fix anything. She stood in the doorway, chin up, eyes red in the raw way that tells you someone either slept badly or didn't sleep at all. I made an appointment, she said, for the test. Okay, I said. Words had become equipment I didn't trust. She moved past me the way you move past a stranger in a narrow airport hall, careful not to touch, sorry without a sentence for it. In the bedroom, she paused at the dresser like it used to hand her clothes like a friend. Do you want me to stay somewhere else until... Yes, I said, because letting her stay would make everything too soft, and soft is how we got here. She didn't argue. She put a few shirts in a bag, a pair of shoes, her prenatal vitamins, the book she'd been reading about sleep schedules that now felt like a prank. At the door, she turned, stuttered, found the manual transmission of her voice. I know sorry isn't enough, she said. I know it's a bad word right now. I just wanted to say it once, not for forgiveness, because I understand what I did. What you did, I said, is choose a person who has made a career out of being chosen. It came out meaner than I meant. It came out true. She flinched. I'll text you after the appointment, she said, and left. I stood with my hand on the doorknob for a full minute because letting go felt like ending a prayer halfway through. Then I let go, like a man who finally understands that some doors don't lead back into rooms. The apartment smelled like the coffee I hadn't finished and like her shampoo, a scent the marketers call blossom something and I call a memory I can't afford. Dad called an hour later. Come by, he said, your mother's at choir practice. When I got there, he was at the kitchen table with the legal pad. Lines had been drawn, boxes had been checked. This is how men like us grieve, I guess. We make columns. He didn't make me read what he'd written. He told me instead. I'm changing the will, he said. I should have done it when he was 17 and I caught him taking cash off my dresser and he said he was helping a friend. I thought he'd grow into a man if I kept feeding the boy. I was wrong. I don't want your money, I said, which sounded noble and felt like a literal lie, because what I wanted was fairness and sometimes money is the only language it speaks. I'm not doing it for you, he said. I'm doing it for the person who can sleep at night in my skin. He gets $1. That way, if he ever tries to drag this to court, the judge will see what I intended. Moral turpitude, I said, because I know the phrase and it tastes like a brass doorknob, cold, metallic, legal. He nodded once. I don't have big words for it. I have a big feeling. He crossed the line there's no coming back from. He swallowed. And so did your mother, in a different way. She didn't sleep with my wife, I said, because gallows humor fits me like a loner suit. No, he said, not smiling. But she made sure he grew up in a world where that looked like a thing he could do and still get chicken on Sunday. He put the pin down. I'm done serving him. Before I could answer, my phone lit with Brandon's name. If you've ever watched a number glow like a cigarette in the dark, you know the thing in my throat. I let it ring, then picked up because cowardice wears so many shapes. What? I said, not bothering to paint it pretty. He didn't warm up to it. You happy? He said. You blew up our family in front of church ladies. You blew it up in hotel rooms, I said. He huffed. Emily told you she doesn't even know if it's yours. You'd let a kid grow up without a father because your ego can't take a hit? You're going to lecture me about fatherhood, I said, and something in my tone made Dad look up because he'd heard it once at a tire shop when a man cheated him on a warranty. Brandon barreled on. Look, man, I'm in a bind here. Mom and Dad won't answer my calls. The dealership cut my hours. Emily's, he stopped, swallowed, named it differently. She wants to see an OB near her sister's place. I'm on the hook for appointments. I can't do this alone. You're not alone, I said. You're with the woman you chose. She chose me, he said, automatic and revealing. You took the safe job, the safe life. You don't get how two people can be. Reckless and cruel, I said. Alive, he said, and I wanted to reach through the phone and pluck the word out of his mouth. What do you want, Brandon? I asked, because you can't tell a story until you know the demand. Talk to Dad, he said. Tell him I'm going to fix it. He listens to you now. He always did, actually. I just didn't see it. I looked at Dad across the kitchen, his hand on the legal pad, his face a closed book with a sticky note where regret lives. No, I said. What do you mean, no? Brandon laughed, brittle. You think you're going to be the hero of this movie if I end up broke? You think people are going to clap when you kick a man when he's down? You're not down, I said. You're at the bottom of a well you dug while everyone told you the ground was solid. I took a breath, and when I spoke again, it was slower. I am not your bank. I am not your press agent. I am not your brother when being your brother means holding your shovel. He went quiet, then tried one last lever. You never forgave me for being the favorite, he said. I almost laughed. You are Mom's favorite, I said. Dad's is whoever acts like a man. Call me when you try it. He swore. He hung up. I set the phone on the table and found my hands were shaking like I'd lifted something heavy and set it down too fast. Dad didn't say good job or I'm proud of you. He poured me coffee. We drank it like old men on a porch, the quiet worth more than a speech. That night when I slept, I dreamed of ledgers that balanced on their own. In the morning, I woke up feeling nothing like a hero and everything like a person who has gone past the point where metaphors are useful. Emily texted the time for the paternity test. I put it in my calendar between a quarterly report and a dentist appointment I still kept out of habit. My life, in a view, cells in a grid, black lines that don't care who lies inside them. On the day of the test, the clinic smelled like rubbing alcohol and old magazines. The receptionist asked for our IDs like we were opening a checking account. Emily wore a sweatshirt with the hood up, as if anonymity could be a fabric. We didn't touch. We answered questions in low voices like we were in a library where someone had checked out the right to be happy. When it was over, she walked to the parking lot without looking back. I stood in the lobby with a cotton ball pressed to the crook of my elbow and thought about every time in my life a needle has told me something I didn't want to know. Blood is honest in a way people aren't. The results would take a few days. Margaret texted me, keep yourself busy. I tried. I helped a musician client figure out how to file quarterly estimates for touring income that had dried up and then come back like a bad storm. I walked to the Parthenon at Centennial Park and stared up at concrete, pretending to be stone, pretending to be something holy. I cooked dinner for one, badly, then better. I ran the Katy Trail by the river because moving feels like a sermon your body preaches to your head. 3 days after the appointment, while I was reconciling an account with a discrepancy so small it should have made me happy, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized from the clinic. I answered in my polite office voice. The nurse said my name in a patient voice. The world narrowed to how much blood a person has. Mr. Brooks, she said, we have your results. Would you like me to email them or? Tell me, I said, because some things hurt less when they hit you in one piece. There was a paper sound, a pause. The probability of paternity is 0%, she said. I don't remember if I thanked her. I do remember the precise detail that a ladybug landed on the window of my office in that second, red and ridiculous and alive. It crawled across the pane like it had places to be. I put the phone down and watched it because the alternative was the floor, and I've already told you what I learned about floors. The ledger balanced, finally. The number didn't go where I wanted it to, but the math knew what it was doing. The email hit my inbox anyway, a PDF I opened like it might bite. Chain of custody, test identifiers, neat categories, probability of paternity, 0%. Even the decimal points felt smug. I stared until the numbers blurred and then snapped back into focus, as if my brain wanted to see if the math changed when you looked away. It didn't. I called Margaret and told her without adornments. She breathed out in that way lawyers do when the thing they predicted arrives on time. Okay, she said. Now we move. We'll file to disestablish the presumption before the birth certificate is signed. You'll petition for divorce on fault grounds. We'll argue for no spousal support. We keep it calm and clean. Don't engage except through counsel. How do I tell her? I asked. You already did, she said, in the only language this version of Emily can hear. She meant the paper, she meant the numbers. I hung up and sat there with my hands flat on the desk because there's a superstition in me that says if I grip anything too hard right now, I could break it. Emily called that night. I let it go to voicemail because I didn't trust my voice not to pick an old habit and start fixing. Her message was short. I got the email, she said. I don't have words. I know that's not helpful. A pause, and then the baby had hiccups today. It felt like tapping. I wanted you to know someone small is still here, even if she stopped, like the word was barbed wire. I'll go through with the court stuff. I won't fight you on that. I'm sorry. I played it twice because the sound of her apology has lived in my bones for a long time, and I wanted to know if it could live there without watering the ground it ruined. It couldn't. I deleted it and immediately regretted deleting it, like a person tossing out food during a famine and only then remembering hunger. The papers moved, like papers move. Margaret filed the petition. Emily accepted service with a shaky signature at the clinic where she worked. There was no scene, no flung ring, just a notary stamp and a handshake, and me reading a cashier's smile on a stranger like it had anything to do with my life. Mom called every day that week. I let most of the calls die in my pocket because I didn't have the spine to be her priest while I tried to mourn a future. On day 4, I picked up because avoidance had become a dress that didn't fit me right. Daniel, she said, too bright and too soft. I made chicken. You should come by. I'm good, I said. Don't be dramatic, she said. You boys always were dramatic. I was quiet, I said. He was loud. Neither of those was drama. They were survival strategies. Silence, and then the pivot she's used my whole life. Your father is punishing your brother, she said, voice tight with grievance she didn't earn. He thinks it's righteous. But what if it's just pride? Frank was a boy once too. He made mistakes. You didn't know him then. I know him now, I said, and I know the difference between a mistake and a pattern you happen to enjoy. He's changing the will, she blurted. He told me. He won't discuss it, just told me like I'm the mailman. The word cracked. It's cruel. It's clear, I said. Clarity can look like cruelty if you've lived in fog long enough. She started to cry, and for once it didn't move me. It sounded like the soundtrack she played over any scene she didn't want to watch. Dad called later. Meet me at Willoughby and Hart, he said. The law office on Elm Hill Pike with the burgundy carpet and the oak chairs nobody loves. He didn't ask, he told me. When I got there, the air smelled like paper and old air conditioning, and a receptionist with perfect handwriting wrote my name on a visitor log like it had to make a good impression on the future. In the conference room, Dad sat with a man whose suit said he was either a lawyer or a funeral director, and whose face said he preferred the former. Mr. Brooks, the lawyer said, I'm Alan Hart. Your father wanted you present as a witness to his intent. Not a reading, I said, because I've seen movies, and because I didn't want Brandon to have that moment years from now where he pretends he didn't see it coming. Not a reading, Hart confirmed, a living conversation. The document was thick, the way documents get when they try to be more than a document. Alan summarized as if he were giving us directions to a place he didn't plan on visiting. Your father is creating a revocable trust today and transferring his primary assets into it, he said. Upon his death, the trust becomes irrevocable and distributes according to clear terms. You, Daniel, are the primary beneficiary. There is a specific bequest to your brother, Brandon Brooks, in the amount of $1 in U.S. currency. $1, I repeated, as if I needed to hear my mouth say it. It establishes intention, Hart said. It shows he wasn't forgotten. It shows he was remembered, Dad said, exactly as he deserves to be remembered if he doesn't change. Hart slid a separate single page across the table. Your father also asked that we draft a letter of wishes. It isn't legally binding, he said, but it explains his moral reasoning. I read it. It was not poetry. It didn't try to be. It said in plain handwriting and some typed lines that could have been any man's that the measure of a life is not the noise it makes but the care it takes, and that he had failed Brandon by letting noise count as care. It said he would feed the person who shows up with clean hands and a willingness to wash dishes. It said justice in a home looks like a locked door on certain rooms. When we were done, Hart asked if I had questions. I had 1,000. None were legal. I shook my head. Dad signed. I witnessed. The pen fell heavier than a pen should. Afterward, in the parking lot, Oklahoma heat shouldered in again, and the cicadas sang like a bad choir. Dad didn't light a cigarette because he hasn't smoked in 20 years, but his body wanted one. He's going to call you, he said. He already did, I said. Dad nodded like a man who wanted to hear what I'd said to him but knew it was mine to carry. Your mother is going to say I'm hard, he said. Maybe I am. I've been soft so long the bones didn't know what to do with themselves. I don't need you to be soft, I said. I needed you to be on my side when I was 10. I'll take it now. We did the logistics, because men like us always bring it back to logistics. He would update beneficiary designations. He would get a new safe deposit box. He would make sure mom understood revocable and irrevocable weren't synonyms for you can argue with this and you can argue louder. We hugged in a way that looked like a handshake with extra parts. Brandon showed up the next afternoon at my condo like a stray that has learned how to sit. He didn't text ahead. He knocked. 3 fast hits like he wanted the door to feel outnumbered. "What?" I said when I opened it, no welcome in it. He wore a tight polo that said he sold to the kind of men who want to be reassured by sleeves. He held nothing in his hands, which for once felt honest. "You can't shut me out," he said by way of hello. "Mom talked to me. I know what Dad did." "He did what he had to," I said. "He did what you wanted," he shot back. "You've been waiting your whole life to win. Congratulations. How's it feel to beat the guy who never competed?" There are sentences so stupid they are beautiful. I let it pass. "If you came for money, you should know the trust isn't a bank. Neither am I." He laughed, the sound of a person flipping through his arsenal and finding it empty. "Money?" he said, feigning outrage. "It's not about money. It's about family. It's about a baby. Emily can't work later in the pregnancy. The dealership cut my hours because the new manager thinks I'm too much for the floor. We could use a little help." "We," I repeated. "Say the word again and tell me who's in it." He stared, unblinking. "You think I wanted this?" he asked, gesturing vaguely at my life as if my hallway art and bookcase had entered into this willingly. She came to me. She said she felt invisible. "You're a good guy, Daniel. You're just boring. You make everything a system. Sometimes people need fireworks." "I give thanks every day you found fireworks," I said. "It makes the exit sign so much easier to see." "Don't be clever," he snapped, and for a second the mask slid and I saw the boy with the lighter again. "Just be a brother." "I was," I said. "For 30 years. I covered for you. I drove you home. I fixed your messes. I moved the line until it was a circle and you danced in it like it was your stage. This is me stepping off it." "You sound like Dad," he said, sneer and marvel in the same breath. "I hope so," I said and shut the door. He hit it once, open palm, a sound that reached for drama and settled for oak. Then his footsteps receded, slow at first, then fast, like a man remembering he didn't park in a good spot. The day Emily went into labor, it rained for the first time in a month. Ty texted me a photo of the storm over the pedestrian bridge and said, "Want coffee or a distraction?" I chose both. We sat at a table at a place in Germantown that serves coffee with names like First Harvest, and you feel silly saying them aloud. "You going to the hospital?" he asked. "I'm not on the list," I said. "You could put yourself on it," he said, a test without judgment. "I could," I said. "And then I could stand in a room watching a woman I love bring a child into the world whose DNA says I'm a guest. I don't have the muscles for that." He nodded. "Then don't. Not all hard things are the right things." We didn't talk about the baby after that. We talked about the Titans draft choices and a documentary about the Opry I hadn't watched and whether he should go back to school for a counseling degree because men like us only stay alive if we remember the world is bigger than the wound. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a photo. Not from Emily, from an unknown number that turned out to be her sister's. The baby was pink and squinty and swaddled in a blanket with little blue and white footprints. The caption didn't have a name. It said, "She's here, healthy. Emily is resting." I stared, felt the pull in my chest I was braced for, and then felt another thing I hadn't prepared to meet, relief. Not because of what I was spared, because the baby existed outside of the lie, and life is stubborn even when love is stupid. I wrote back, "Thank you for telling me. I wish you both health." Then I turned the phone over and lay on my back and did not cry in a way that felt like growth and cowardice in equal measure. The divorce moved the way court calendars move, slow and then suddenly. Margaret arranged for a settlement meeting in an office that snowed like neutral carpets. Emily sat across from me, slick ponytail, sweatshirt that said Music City Moms in a font that made me feel like a tourist in my own life. Her lawyer was a woman who could have sold sympathy at a markup. Margaret went first, because she understands narrative. "No alimony," she said. "Each keeps their own retirement. He keeps the condo he bought before marriage. She keeps the car in her name. No claim to future assets. He waives any claim to the child and is not named on the birth certificate. Parties agree to no contact except regarding final paperwork." Emily's lawyer cleared her throat. "Ms. Green would like to request Daniel's continued involvement in the child's life as a chosen father, if not a legal one." "No," I said out loud before Margaret could put a law word on my boundary. Emily looked at me like I'd thrown water on a candle. "You don't have to be afraid," she said, voice trembling in that gentle way she says for frightened patients. You could be an uncle, or..." "I'm not afraid," I said. "I'm finished." She flinched like the word had weight. "You loved me," she said, and the past tense cut clean. "I did," I said. "And I love the person I am when I'm not in rooms where you teach me to doubt the floor." Her lawyer pivoted to money because money always volunteers to be the villain. Margaret swatted down the attempt at support with fault grounds and the paternity disestablishment order. We signed papers, we slid them across the table like parts of a body we were done pretending belonged together. Outside in the parking lot, in the strange bright you get after long fluorescent hours, Emily stopped me with a small motion of her hand. "He's not good," she said, the he we didn't name obvious. "Brandon, he's not a good partner. I'm scared." "I know," I said, and that was the last true thing we ever said to each other. 2 weeks later, Dad called. "Your mother wants to sit down," he said, "one time, at the house, if you'll come." "I'll come," I said, because endgame is also a kind of beginning. Mom had set the table like she was expecting the governor. China we never used, napkin rings from a wedding I barely remember, roast carrots arranged like a wreath. She wore a dress I've only seen at funerals and Easter. Dad sat like a judge who wishes he could be a gardener. Brandon came in late, of course. He wore a shirt that thought it was ironed and a look that thought it was contrition. He didn't look at me. He kissed Mom's cheek and stood behind his chair like a man who isn't sure he's invited to sit. Mom tried to start with prayer. Dad let her say 2 sentences and then lifted his hand. "We're not here for theater," he said. I didn't speak. I listened as my father, who has always chosen less speech over more, decided this was the day he would spend his words. He told Brandon he loved him enough to stop being his fan. He told Mom he loved her enough to stop lying about the way she had made a temple out of denial and then demanded we all worship in it. He told me he should have put his hand on my shoulder in kitchens like this one 20 years ago when the lighter came out. He turned to Brandon. "You are getting $1 in my will," he said. "A dollar you can frame if you want, as a reminder of how cheap a good life becomes if you break it yourself." Brandon swallowed like his throat had found a rock. "You can't be serious," he said, whine and panic in one vocal cord. "I have never been more serious," Dad said. Brandon's eyes slid to Mom. "Old muscle memory." She opened her mouth. Dad shook his head once, slow, and she closed it. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother obey a truth she didn't like. Brandon left before dessert, which is to say he left before Mom tried to sweeten us with sugar. At the door, he leaned toward me like maybe he had one last trick, a secret handshake we could resurrect. "You won," he said, not whispering, not loud, just dead. "No," I said. "I stopped playing." He laughed once, hollow, and walked out into a twilight that didn't care who he was. Months moved, as they do, quietly colossal. Emily and Brandon moved in together in an apartment near Madison where the rent is low and the parking lots are loud. I know this because Dad knows a guy on every street and because Nashville is a small town with more neon. The baby got a name I learned by accident when an envelope arrived at my place once with the wrong apartment number and the right return address. I didn't open it. I left it on the mailroom counter with a sticky note that said for 2B and tried not to think about the fact that fate now uses my handwriting to ferry small facts from one life to another. Ty dragged me to a therapist named June, who operates out of a cottage in 12 South with a ficus that probably has more followers than I do. She had a way of letting silence sit between us until I filled it with honest things because lying in that room felt like bringing trash into a church. I told her about numbers and doors and how being boring had saved my life and almost killed my marriage. If boring kept you safe in a house that wasn't, she said, then boring isn't a flaw. It's a wisdom your body learned. Now you get to decide which parts you keep. I ran, I cooked, I burned chicken, and then didn't. I stopped scrolling photos of a person I once thought would teach our child how to whistle. I let Dad take me fishing one Saturday morning, even though I hate fishing. We stood at a lake that pretended to be a mirror and tried to talk about lures. He handed me a thermos of coffee and said, "I should have taught you this earlier." And I said, "I'm glad you're teaching me anything now." And neither of us looked at each other when we said it because some sentences are meant to be aimed at the water. Mom learned silence like a foreign language. There were slips. She tried once to show me a photo on her phone of the baby in a Halloween onesie that said, "My first boo," and I handed the phone back without looking. "I can't," I said gently. "Not now." She nodded and, to her credit, didn't push the phone closer. She started asking me about my work, about my clients, about whether the new French place was worth the money, because she chooses small talk when the big talk is radioactive. I took it. It was a meal where the utensils don't match. Brandon called once more, late, from a number I didn't recognize. His voice was thick and slow. "You think you're safe?" he said, like a threat someone forgot to load. "I think I'm done," I said. "You're a coward," he slurred. "You ran." "I stayed," I said, "just not where you asked me to." He laughed and it turned into a cough. "She cries, you know," he said. "She cries and says your name like it's medicine." "Don't," I said, and my voice had an edge that surprised me. "Don't you use her pain to borrow my attention. It's been repossessed." I hung up because growth sometimes sounds like a click. When the divorce was final, when the judge said the words that turned two into one again with the indifference of a calendar, I went home and made a sandwich and cried into it like a man who had finally given himself permission to be ridiculous. Then I called Dad and told him I was coming over. We sat on the porch and didn't talk about the decree. We talked about the Titans again and whether the Magnolia was going to take the roof. He put his hand on my shoulder, and I left it there until the porch light attracted too many bugs for either of us to pretend we were comfortable. I didn't wake up happy the next morning. I woke up empty in a way that felt clean. There is grief in deciding not to be a father to a child you had already named in your head. There is guilt in watching a woman you loved learn the cost of her choices without cushioning her fall. There is relief so profound it feels like sin. All of that can live in one person without that person being a monster. June told me this. I repeated it until it didn't feel like I'd stolen it from someone wiser. Work forgot that my life had rearranged itself, and in that amnesia I found a gift. My clients still send frantic emails about payroll and sales tax and the petty bureaucracies of commerce. I solved problems for them, and doing so reminded me that not every problem is a story about betrayal. Some are just about decimal points. On a day in late winter, months after the night with the iPad and the camera and the pie, I walked past the car lot on Rivergate. Brandon was out front in a jacket too thin for the air, laughing with a couple who looked like they had decided to buy the SUV long before they got there. He didn't see me. Or if he did, he didn't let it register. He leaned into the driver's side to point out a feature, and I recognized his posture, his sales laugh, his talent for making strangers feel like he was the solution to their problem and not the problem they bring home. I kept walking. He is not my problem. That is not cruelty. That is math. When Dad's trust statements arrive now, they go in a drawer, not because I'm counting the money, but because I'm counting the days I can live without letting money do the counting for me. I visit my parents more. I help Dad change the filters on the HVAC and pretend I know more than I do because he likes it that way. I let Mom talk to me about choir outfits and pie recipes because wounded people still have to feed themselves and the people they wounded. Sometimes, late, I take the long way home down Broadway. The music spills, the bachelor parties shout, and for a second I feel like the city is a sound I could stand inside until the parts of me that remember want and fire and foolishness shut up. Then I turn onto my street, where the lights are calmer, and I unlock my door and I go inside and I sit at my small kitchen table and write down 3 things I'm grateful for because rituals are a kind of scaffolding you build so you don't fall back into the hole you escaped. Most nights the list is the same: coffee, running shoes, a father who chose me. Some nights I add a 4th. The audacity to believe that fairness isn't a ledger, it's a boundary I drew and refuse to move again. If you've listened this far, you probably want a verdict, a neat line that tells you what to do if your life is playing my song on repeat. I don't have a neat line, I have this: when people show you who they are, you can love them and still move out of the way. When family asks you to pay interest on a debt you never agreed to, you can declare bankruptcy on that arrangement. When someone hands you a lie wrapped as a gift, you can put it back in their hands without saying thank you. Brandon's dollar will one day sit in a frame on a wall somewhere. Maybe he'll call it a joke. Maybe he'll call it an injustice. Maybe he'll put it in a drawer until a child finds it and asks, "Dad, why do you have a dollar in a frame?" And he'll tell them whatever story makes him look like a victim or a hero, depending on what he's selling that day. That's none of my business. My business is showing up where I say I will, for people who live in the light I can live with. I used to think fairness was a ledger. Now I know it's a door you keep shut when people ask to come in carrying fire. I am done being the kindling. I am done being the bank. I am finally my father's son and not the brother of a boy I once tried to save. What do you think about this story? Would you cut off your brother if he got your wife pregnant and then came begging when the money dried up? Tell me in the comments. Hit like if you stayed with me to the end, and subscribe if you want more true-to-life stories with real twists and messy choices.